Welcome to the third episode in a Legendarium series about medieval trade. In Part 3, Feudal Lords and Merchant Republics, we will talk about the rise of the feudal order in 10th century Europe and the emergence of a powerful merchant republic in Venice. By the 10th century, a new social and economic order emerged in Europe. During the early Middle Ages, the continent suffered near constant invasion from Vikings, Magyar horsemen, and Moors from northern Africa. In response, local warlords, some of whom had their roots in the Carolingian army, took up arms to defend their holdings. Never a uniform process, this created a patchwork of fiefdoms across Europe, ruled by barons who ruled from strongholds. These lords in turn subdivided their holdings among warriors who had their own horses. Such knights might hold a few square miles, and their social role, quite simply, was to allow for unimpeded farming. While there was still plenty of war going on, these conflicts tended to be smaller border skirmishes rather than the epic campaigns of the Viking and Magyar years. Without plunder to feed and arm their retinues, lords going into the 11th century took a greater interest in estate management to fill their coffers. They used peasant farmers for communal projects like digging drainage ditches and building barns. To preserve soil, lordly officials oversaw an innovation called three-field rotation. Planting the same crop year after year drains soil nutrients. So medieval farmers planted wheat or rye in one field, then planted oats, peas, or broad beans in the second. The third field was left fallow so it would replenish. Each year the crops would be rotated to leave one field fallow, and the soil kept good for generations. A village served as a basic unit within a fiefdom tied to a feudal lord and his armed retinue. Village communities allotted strips of land to families for growing grains, and lords allowed families fenced-off garden plots for growing vegetables. Though not an especially just method of government, it was inexpensive. Even the worst-off medieval peasants in Western Europe worked only 40 or 50 days to provide for their feudal dues. The watchword for a fiefdom, quite simply, was self-sufficiency. As such, any fief needed its own watermill. When combined with the proper equipment, water wheels ground grain, moved pumps, operated bellows, and made vegetable oils. Cistercian monks pioneered new technology related to watermills, in part so they could provide for themselves and keep away from the wicked world. It would seem that such a social structure would stymie trade, since the warlords who ran things wanted a self-contained war machine, and it often did. Yet international trade still picked up, and it did so in Italy first. The Lombards and East Romans liked to fight each other, and used Italy as their battlefield. That meant the Italian states had to govern themselves, make alliances, and keep stable so they could keep their freedom in a fast-shifting political landscape. Most of northern Italy remained under the control of the East Roman Empire, which had taken quite a pounding during the 7th century, losing Egypt and Arabia to the new Abbasid state. Yet the empire kept control of Asia Minor and the Balkans, and most importantly the Dardanelles. That meant they controlled and taxed trade from Asia to Europe, which meant the East Roman Empire could keep financing its military. Venice had been founded in the year 600 AD by Italic refugees fleeing the Lombards, and those refugees built a city on wooden pilings sunk into the marshes of the appropriately named Venetian Lagoon. By 800 AD, the East Roman Empire allowed Venice to become a republic, and they elected Doge Orso Epato to run the state with a council of tribunes and a people's assembly. Such checks and balances were almost unheard of in the medieval world and earned Venice an international reputation for stability in an age of war. To bolster that reputation, in 828 AD, a party of Venetian officials sailed to the Muslim-ruled city of Alexandria. There they stole the body of St. Mark the Evangelist, supposedly packed his remains in pork so Muslim customs officials wouldn't look too hard, and took him back to Venice to become their patron saint. In time, St. Mark's lion became the symbol of Venice. Going into the 10th century, Venice parlayed its location into becoming an economic powerhouse. Overland trade routes were defunct because of frequent wars, but Venetians could still travel by sea. Relatively close to East Roman holdings through the Adriatic, Venice could easily reach eastern goods, control the Adriatic sea routes, and then sell those goods to the warlords who grew increasingly wealthy and powerful across northern Europe. These eastern goods included spices, perfumes, silk, and silver. As their wealth grew, Venice colonized islands on the Dalmatian coast to gather resources and discourage piracy at sword point. When most medieval states served as war machines, Venice became a money-making machine. The merchants ran its governing council, the state treasury provided loans and insurance to traders, and artisans used mass production to crank out ships on a scale unseen until the Industrial Revolution, almost 700 years later. Milan also became prominent as a middleman for the Venetians, buying goods from them and moving them further north. By controlling the narrow Adriatic Sea, the Venetians took half of Italy out of competition. Westward-facing Italian cities like Genoa could join the Mediterranean trade, but they would never hold a candle to Venice during the Middle Ages. As such, any of the warlords who ruled France, England, or Germany who wanted some shiny stuff from the East probably bought it from the Venetians, and they made a fortune. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.